chapter 10, we had the 70 that got sent out in pairs of 2 by Jesus to spread the news that the coming of the Lord was near. And then last week, the poignant story of the Good Samaritan, and now we're here at Mary and Martha. I think it's important for us to know a little something generally about the Gospel of Luke, and that Gospel of Luke has a couple of themes. And one is hospitality. The hospitality we receive and the hospitality that we give. And the other main theme of Luke is to bring a voice to those that are marginalized, those on the edge of society, those that are perhaps outcast. And so all 3 of our stories in chapter 10 hold together those themes of hospitality and the marginalized. And so I think it would behoove us to look at the Mary and Martha story in context of those other 2 stories in chapter 10. Because I think that when we look at all 3 stories together, we start seeing that there is a light shine on the fact that Jesus is telling us there are 3 ways to receive his hospitality, his care, his love. To receive it in 3 different ways. If we only look at Mary and Martha's story alone, too often it gets interpreted as Mary's doing what's right, Martha's doing what's wrong, and we all need to be more like Mary. That interpretation frustrates me. Because that's not my life. And I don't think it's your life. Because life is hard, and there are things that trip us up and put us face down in the dirt. And sometimes I just can't be pious enough to sit at the feet of Jesus. Because life is hard. And don't tell me to do it. And so that's the way this sometimes gets interpreted. And I don't think it's helpful to us. I don't think it's helpful to any of us. So let's look at the 3 stories collectively as a light shining on how we receive Jesus' hospitality in 3 different ways. So remember back a couple weeks ago, we talked about the 70 that got sent out in pairs of 2 to share the good news that the gospel is near, that the coming of the Lord is near. And Jesus says, I'm sending you out like lambs among the wolves. He says, you're going to be victimized. You're going to be marginalized. But you're going to be okay. He says, rely on the hospitality of those that you come in contact. And most importantly, rely on my hospitality that I provide for you. To give you the courage to go out in the first place. To say the things that you need to say and the wisdom to do it all with. Because remember, he said you can't take your earthly possessions with you. You can't take your coat, your shoes, or your bag or your purse with you. You need to rely on the Lord's hospitality to do what I'm sending you to do. I'm sending you out like lambs among the wolves, but yet in that story they all returned with joy. Joy despite the danger. Joy despite the lack of earthly resources they were allowed to take with them. And joy despite the fact of all the questions they must have had about where am I to go, what am I to say, what am I going to eat, where am I going to stay, how am I going to get through this. And despite all of that, they put their trust in the one who sent them and his hospitality, and they returned with joy. So they are sustained by the hospitality and presence of Christ. Now last week we heard that poignant story that we know so well, the story of the Good Samaritan. When I read that story and hear that, I'd like to ask you a question. What character are you in that story? Are you the Good Samaritan? Are you the one face down in the ditch? Are you the ones walking by, or maybe the innkeeper? Who are you in that story? For me, when I read that story, I see myself as the Good Samaritan. As a doctor and a pastor caring for people every day, all day, I see myself as a caregiver. I see myself as the Good Samaritan. But there have been curveballs in life that have put me face down in the muck and the mire of the ditch. Who's the Good Samaritan then? Who's the Good Samaritan for us every day, regardless of where we're at? The Good Samaritan in this story is Jesus. Jesus is our Good Samaritan. Because in the worst of times, in the deepest and darkest valleys I found myself in, and that I will come to find myself again, I'm certain, because that's the way life is, it's been Jesus, who is my Good Samaritan, working through people around me. But Jesus is our Good Samaritan. He is the one who sustains us and cares for us when no one else can. Those ditches we land in life come at hard moments in our life. Sometimes it's the loss of someone in our life. A parent, a sibling, a spouse, a child. Sometimes it's the loss of relationships from divorce, or our kids rejecting us. Or sometimes it's from the loss of a job that encompasses who we are. We lost our identity through the loss of a job. Some of us have been through those things. Some of us are going through those things right now. And we all will probably have an opportunity to be in another one somewhere in the future. But that story promises us that Jesus, hospitality and care, is who comes and gets us, and who cares for us when no one else can. So Jesus sends us and provides us hospitality to give us the wisdom of the things to share and to do. And when we get thrust into the ditch, he is our Good Samaritan. It brings us to Mary and Martha. It too is a story of hospitality and more subtly marginalization. It says, now as they went on their way, he entered a certain village, where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. And she had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he is saying. So Mary extended hospitality to Jesus, and Mary has taken this position up at Jesus' feet. And now this is frankly pretty darn unheard of in this time because of the patriarchal system that was there. Women were not allowed at the feet of the teacher. They were in the outer courts. And so Luke wants to make it very clear to us that the people that Jesus wants nearest to him are the ones that are marginalized, the ones that need his hospitality. That's us. And so the scripture goes on to say, but Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you're worried and distracted about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. As I said at the beginning, sometimes the story is Mary is right, Martha is wrong, and we need to be more like Mary. But rather, I think the story is about hospitality from Jesus when we're weary from our journey. When we're tired and we're worried and we're distracted by all the things that make up our life. And Jesus says, take a moment and open up your heart and let me give you hospitality. Let me feed you. Let me nourish you. Let me restore your soul. Because have you ever found yourself worried and distracted by many things? Like this week? We all come to those times. When we get worried and distracted by all the things that make up our life. That makes us human. And while we're worried and distracted, as Christians and baptized Christians, we know that we should be taking a little time out, slowing down a little bit, and seeking the rest of Christ. Right? We know that. But it's hard. I found the times that I am most overwhelmed with all the things that go on in a week is when I'm the furthest from Christ. Christ never moves. We do. Christ is the constant. We move toward and away all the time. It's the rhythm of our lives. And so when I'm the farthest away from Christ, that is when I am most overwhelmed. Because I'm trying to do it on my own. I'm trying to figure stuff out on my own. I'm trying to do it under my own power. And it usually doesn't work really well. I'm a little harried at home. And Roland would agree. Have you prayed about it? Oh, good idea. Because I haven't let God guide me. And soon as I get to that harried point, I go, I gotta stop and just pray to God for His wisdom, for His power. Then all of a sudden there is a peace that comes in the midst of all of that worry and distraction. And He feeds my soul. He nourishes what I need. And so whenever any of us come to that point when we're starting to be worried and that's overtaking our day, we need to just stop and open up our heart through a prayer to Christ to come in and nourish us, to feed us, to restore our souls. To be honest and allow the wisdom of Christ to guide us. So the story of Mary and Martha is a reminder to us that when we're losing our focus because we're distracted by all of the many things we have on our plates, Jesus is calling us to open up our hearts to His hospitality, to His care, and to His love, so that He can gift us with His peace and His presence, and to refresh our souls, to restore our spirits. Jesus' hospitality does truly feed and sustain our souls and pulls us out of the muck of the worry that is distracting us. That worry sucks the lifeblood out of us. And so we need to be nourished with the blood of Christ. So these three stories are about receiving the hospitality of Christ in three different ways. We receive the hospitality of Christ with the assurance of His presence when we go to do His work. When we fall on hard times, when we find ourselves in those valleys, and when we need to be renewed and restored. When we're doing what we're called to do, we are assured of the promise of Christ that He is with us to do His work. When we fall into those dark places, into the valleys, into the hard times, He is with us to care for us as our good Samaritan, when no one else can. And when we need to be renewed and restored, He is with us to calm us, to nurture and feed our spirits and our souls when we become overwhelmed by the things of life. stories in Luke 10 assure us that Christ is with us on the journey. He is with us and will pick us up in the valleys. And when we're just exhausted from the journey, he will renew us and refresh us. We receive the hospitality of Christ in three ways. Really, in that whole cycle of life of being called and sent, being marginalized in the process of that, facing life's hardships, and when we're just plain exhausted and overwhelmed. Christ is there. His presence is with us through the power of the Holy Spirit. And for that we give honor and praise to our loving and caring